So this is the second video, the final video for the final week. Integrating Missiological Perspectives number 2, the 21st century. So now we're going to go with Bevans and Schroeder beyond the three paradigms that they've used to describe three different models in the history of mission. And we're going to talk about where they think that mission is going in the 21st century. So, first of all, they talk about new developments in the arena of mission. They say that mission is in the process of a rebirth, that in the 1960s through the 1980s, that mission was in profound crisis, and that now mission is being reborn, both for Catholics and for Protestants. They say that in this new rebirth, that there is quite a bit of interaction and exchange between the paradigms, which I'm sure that some of you had the same reaction that I had when I read those paradigms, which is, wait a minute, wait a minute, we don't fit in one or the other. You know, many of us have aspects of at least two of them, maybe of all three of them. And so part of what Bevans and Schroeder is saying is in the very late 20th century and the 21st century, when many of us came of age, and many of us began to be engaged as missionaries, that the three paradigms were no longer strictly separate, but there was quite a bit of interaction and exchange. And that is not unrelated to the explosion of mission in the global south, where the way that mission is done does not neatly fit the categories, even though it tends toward traditional, orthodox, and spiritual or mystical, but it is more supportive of culture in many ways than paradigm A. And I would say that in Latin America, it's also more holistic. Of course, that's where I know it the best. So they also mention that in the 21st century that Christianity will have to deal with Islam, that given the rate of growth of Islam, that is going to be an ongoing challenge to Christian evangelism and mission. They then talk about three current theological streams which roughly correspond to the paradigms, even though not neatly. So they talk about a Trinitarian view of mission, which they identify with paradigm B. They talk about God's reign, which they identify with paradigm C, and they talk about the centrality of Christ, which they identify with paradigm A. I do encourage you to go back and read this section. It's very dense, it's very theologically dense, but particularly for those of you who are working with deep theology, it would be worth reading. They then give their model for the 21st century, which they call prophetic dialogue, and they believe that their model deepens and synthesizes the prior models. So what is prophetic dialogue? First of all, they say that their model comes out of theological reflection on missionary praxis. So they're looking at missionary praxis around the world in the 21st century, and they're noting that it is multicultural and ecumenical, and then they're making some observations about what it is. They're saying that there's a recognition in missionary praxis in the 21st century that mission belongs to God, that we are invited, all of us are invited to participate in God's mission. In fact, baptism is a call to mission, that every Christian is called to mission. They believe that mission is intrinsically holistic. So they talk about a single complex reality of mission that integrates all of these dimensions. And they say that every dimension is a form of prophetic dialogue. So they talk about witness as prophetic dialogue, proclamation as prophetic dialogue, prayer and liturgy and contemplation as prophetic dialogue, justice and peace and the integrity of creation as prophetic dialogue, and reconciliation as prophetic dialogue. And they go into depth on all of these. And again, go back and check out anything that you want to explore. Just as Bosch is a classic, so is Bevans and Schroeder a classic, because of the depth, the exhaustive research that goes into everything that they do. They also say that prophetic dialogue in general, it's manifested in all of these different ways, but prophetic dialogue in general takes people where they are. So it's profoundly enculturated, to use the Catholic term. Contextualized is what we would often say in the Protestant context, but enculturated. But it always also calls them beyond to conversion. So they quote Bosch's term, bold humility. So how does prophetic dialogue respond to the constants? Remember, the constants are the 6 questions, right? So they're saying the Christology in prophetic dialogue is spirit Christology. So really seeing Jesus through the lens of the Holy Spirit, seeing the Holy Spirit through the lens of Jesus. Then they're saying that it is exemplar and liberational. So I don't think that means for Bevins and Schroeder that it's not redemptive, but that as we understand the redemptive work of Christ, that we understand it as opening up a vision of possibility for us and of liberating us to live into that possibility. They see it as inclusive and modified pluralist, which again means that they think that we see the Christ of the Bible in multiple forms and that we can respond to him in all these forms. Doesn't mean that we don't proclaim Christ, but that we recognize that people meet Christ in many different ways and contexts. Ecclesiology is herald, servant, sacrament, community and mission, pilgrim, people of God, missional. And what they mean by piling all of those words onto how we understand the church is that it is in the church. And I think they don't just mean institution, they mean the community of the church. That in the community of the church, that people see the living Christ, that they see a vision of new possibility when they see the church. The eschatology is historical and communal, and what they mean by that is not that Christ isn't coming back, but what they mean is that when Christ comes back, that it is going to come back, he is going to come back into history. It's not that we leave this world and go to him. He is coming back into human history. And it is communal in that we all will participate in it in some way. Salvation is holistic, as I mentioned. It incorporates all of creation. The anthropology is communal and cosmic. So we're not just looking at who is a human being, we're looking at who are we as human community. And we see ourselves simultaneously as physical and spiritual. So there's a cosmic understanding of humanity. And lastly, that culture is critically positive, that we are countercultural in some ways, we celebrate culture in others in this new model of prophetic dialogue, that anthropologically we pay attention to the praxis. We pay attention to what is actually going on in culture. It's not fixed, it's fluid. How do we respond to it on the ground? So I hope that's helpful, and I look forward to your summaries.